Sunset on Biscayne, a Miles Harrington mystery. Chapter 1, Balcony at Dusk. The sky over Biscayne Bay was bruised violet and copper as Detective Miles Harrington stepped out of the unmarked Ford Taurus into the humid Miami evening. A soft breeze stirred the palms lining Brickell Avenue, carrying a tang of salt, exhaust, and something indefinitely sweet. Perhaps the last promise of summer before Fashion Week's glittering frenzy. Miles brushed a strand of dark hair from his forehead, zipped his leather jacket against the damp air, and crossed the slick pavement toward the towering glass façade of the Azure Point condominium. Inside the lobby, pastel marble floors reflected the low glow of recessed lighting. A single doorman in a crisp white jacket regarded Miles with polite suspicion. "Detective Harrington," he said, voice smooth as an Italian tailor's pitch. "Up the elevator, top floor, Unit 34B. The elevator hummed upward, pausing with soft chimes on the 34th floor. Miles stepped into a hallway muted by thick carpet and walls painted in a pale ocean blue. He found 34B's door, gleaming black, slightly ajar. He drew his badge, eased the door fully open, and slipped inside. The condo was a modernist showcase. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furnishings, and a living room that looked out on the bay. But the scene that met him was brutal in its contrast. A sleek chaise longue lay askew on the ivory rug, its upholstery spattered with dark, congealing blood. Glass fragments glinted across the floor, and a single high-heel pump lay near the balcony's threshold. He moved in, surveying the chaos. The open sliding door revealed a narrow balcony, the city's neon lights strobing through the humid haze. On the balcony railing, a pastel Palm Beach postcard rested upright against the frame, held in place by something small and heavy, perhaps a stone. Miles knelt, peered at the message scrawled on its back in red ink. "Find me where the tide washes secrets ashore." He photographed the note, slipping it into an evidence bag. Then he turned his attention to the condo interior. No obvious signs of forced entry, no footprints in the plush carpet. It was as if the killer had slipped in and out with inhuman precision. "Detective," Officer Ramirez's soft voice drifted from the doorway. "Forensics is on their way. The victim's model card says she's 24 Alejandra Cruz, Alex." Miles nodded, rising, and followed Ramirez to the balcony. The postcard's stone weight was a small shell, white and pockmarked, as though dredged from a forgotten cove. He pressed a gloved finger to its rough surface. It left a grey smudge. He pocketed the shell in a paper evidence envelope. Below, the bay's waves glittered like shards of broken glass, and beyond them, the city pulse-towering condos, flickering billboards, and the hazy outline of Key Biscayne. A yacht horn sounded in the distance, a mournful note that carried strangely on the still air. "Any witnesses?" Miles asked. Ramirez shook her head. "Building's empty at this hour. Security cameras were disabled. Looked like someone knew exactly which feeds to cut. Maintenance says the last activity logged here was hours ago." Miles pressed his palm to the cool glass of the balcony door, as if drawing energy from the still-lit city. "She couldn't have made this jump on her own," he said. "The railing's too narrow, and she was wearing stilettos." Ramirez grimaced. "Rooftop gardens, smoking areas, helipad, nothing up there. We've combed the roof, no sign of her." He retraced his steps inside, eyes scanning for overlooked details. Near the chaise longue lay Alex Cruz's designer clutch. Miles unzipped it carefully, revealing a tangle of small essentials, lipstick tube, compact mirror, cell phone. But tucked beneath a slim notebook was the postcard's twin, another weathered card, identical except for a single phrase in chipped cursive, almost faded entirely. "Don't let the tide claim my voice." He photographed this too, his mind racing with possibilities. 2 cards, 2 messages, one pointing outward, one inward. It felt deliberate, a puzzle meant to guide anyone savvy enough to piece it together. He slipped both cards into separate envelopes. "Get me a manifest of who had access to this unit. Building staff, maintenance contractors, any visitor logs, and alert the waterfront patrol. Someone could have dropped her or dragged her into the water. Ramirez nodded, already tapping orders into her phone. Miles lingered by the bay windows a moment longer, watching the tide's restless glide. Somewhere along that shoreline lay a secret waiting to be washed up, a secret that could kill again. He collected his jacket, turned for the door, and noticed on a slender console table by the entryway a single item he'd almost missed. A camera lens cap, matte black and branded with a stylized M in silver. Not Alex's. He knew her from the files she modeled for boutique shoots, not paparazzi. He picked it up, checked the imprint. M, indeed. Maybe a photographer. He held it between gloved fingers, weighing its significance. He slipped the cap into an evidence bag. Outside, the rain began to fall, fat droplets that sizzled as they hit the hot pavement. Miles Harrington paused on the threshold, looking back at the condo's darkened interior. Something about this felt personal. A staged fall, cryptic clues, and now a photographer's token. This was more than a random killing. It was a message, and Miles intended to read every word. He stepped off the balcony, closing 34B behind him, and let the door click into place. The night air swallowed the rain's whispers, and the neon glow of Miami's towers stretched before him like an invitation or a threat. He slipped the keycard back to Ramirez. Let's find out who left the tide's secrets on that shore. And with that, he turned toward the waiting Taurus, already plotting his next move in the game that had only just begun. Chapter 2, Neon and Narcotics. The pulse of electronic bass vibrated through Miles Harrington's chest as he ducked under the velvet rope of Club Mirage on Ocean Drive. Neon signs cast jagged blue and pink shadows across the polished terrazzo floor, and a haze of cigar smoke mingled with the sweetness of imported cognac. He slipped past the hostess's raised eyebrow. Plain clothes carried more weight than a suit here, and descended the slender stairwell into the club's drenched-in-darkness main room. Strobe lights fractured the darkness into shards of movement. Bare shoulders, sparkly bodysuits, and the flash of blade-tipped stilettos scuffing against the bar's chrome lip. Miles paused at the edge of the throng, scanning for faces. The bartender, an impeccably groomed ex-model turned mixologist, recognized him from photos. He met Miles's eye, then leaned in over the bar. "Detective, I wasn't sure you'd come," the bartender said, his voice a low rumble. "Alex was here. She left with a pair of men about an hour ago." "How many?" Miles asked, resting a hand on the bar's black lacquer. "Two. One tall, lean build, about 6'2", buzz cut. The other shorter, stockier, tattoos along his neck. They slipped out through the back service door." Miles nodded, sliding a reporter's notebook from his coat pocket. "You're positive it was Alex Cruz?" "Her. I poured her favorite gin and passion fruit right here." He tapped a spot on the bar. She looked tense, kept checking her phone. These two kept glancing over their shoulders like they expected someone to follow. He frowned. "I tried to stop them. Told them it looked dangerous, that it was past closing. They shrugged me off, paid cash, no tip." Miles scribbled the description and date-stamped it mentally. April 5th, 1997, 11:43 p.m. He folded the notebook shut. "Thanks. I'll need a statement later, and any security footage you can get me." The bartender nodded, already tapping at a back-of-bar terminal. "For you, detective, I'll see what I can recover." Miles threaded his way through the dancers and loungers to the back hallway, where a row of mirrored doors led to VIP rooms. Each corridor wall sported a framed oil painting of a half-naked muse, tasteful and disconcerting. He found a tastefully ornate exit sign above a heavy service door and pushed through into a dim alley. The scent of stale beer and diesel from the adjacent garage greeted him. He followed footprints in the muddy puddles toward an unmarked white van idling behind overturned trash bins. The driver's side door was ajar. Miles crouched and peered inside. Crushed beer cans, a half-smoked joint still smoldering in the ashtray, and a crushed palm frond leaf. He fished the leaf into an evidence bag and photographed the scene. A sudden click at the alley's mouth made him pivot. Two silhouettes lingered in the orange glow of a street lamp, a tall man with a buzz cut and a shorter figure with tattoos just visible on his forearms. Both held cell phones, their screens illuminating tense expressions. Miles stepped forward. "Miami PD, stop right there." They bolted. The taller figure dove into the van's passenger side, while the shorter sprinted down the alley. Miles drew his Glock, slammed open the driver's side door and shouted, "Police, freeze!" The tire squeal as the van's engine roared to life answered instead. The driver, mid-20s, athletic, gunned the accelerator. The van lurched forward, fish-tailed, and screeched past Miles, clipping the trash bins and grinding into the alley wall before lurching onto Ocean Drive. Miles wasted no time. He drew breath, then sprinted after, dodging the scattered litter. The van barreled through the exit, and eyeing the neon haze ahead, Miles radioed for backup. He vaulted into the street and pursued on foot, the world turning into a blur of headlights and honking horns. Within 20 seconds, the van shot around a corner onto Washington Avenue. Miles slowed at the intersection, panting, scanning for its tail lights. He spotted the taillights weaving through traffic a block away. He turned back. The shorter suspect had reappeared, cutting across the gas station's forecourt to shadow the van's path. Miles angled to intercept. But before he could close the distance, the tattooed figure scrambled behind a bulldozer, parked in the station's spotlights, and vanished. Miles holstered his gun, checking the gas pumps for footprints, but found none. Some alleys were swept clean, others soaked by last night's watering. He called it in. The backup arrived minutes later, a pair of patrol units and a sergeant who greeted Miles with raised brows. "You get a plate?" Miles shook his head, flashing the leaf in its bag. "Discarded evidence, 2 suspects on foot. Suspect vehicle heading northwest on Washington. White van, no markings, likely pillaged for parts or rented. Let forensics dust it for prints." The sergeant nodded. "Got teams on it. You okay?" Miles took a breath. "I'm fine." He forced a smile. "Couldn't catch the runners, but we've got a lead." Back inside Club Mirage, Miles studied the guest list obtained from management. A roster of elite partygoers and VIPs allowed into Alex's exclusive after-party. Moments later, Detective Ramirez arrived with a digital printout. She handed him a list of names, high-profile models, agents, and a handful of names Miles didn't recognize. Scratch that. Names he'd seen on FBI bulletins for suspected money laundering and drug trafficking. He tapped one entry. Rafael Delgado, known associate of the Gaviota cartel. Miami branch, tattoo of winged serpent on right forearm. He glanced up at the bar's camera, its red LED blinking steadily. "You cut the feed here, then?" Mirage's manager approached, sweating despite the AC. Detective, we have records someone bypassed our DVR, but the main control room's cams caught the back exit. We'll email the footage." Miles pocketed the card. "Make sure it's unedited, and I want the bartender's full statement. Someone wanted Alex to slip out unseen, and they knew exactly where to hide evidence. No prints, no witnesses, no one to see them carry her out." He stepped onto the dance floor again, heart hammering to the beat. Somewhere among the neon-lit bodies and cigar smoke lurked a network built on narcotics and fear. Someone likely delivered Alex to her death beyond the condo balcony. He needed to know why. Miles raised his voice to be heard over the DJ's clangor. "Ramirez," he shouted, "get me every name on this guest list, and pull up Alex's phone records, call logs, messages. Someone was sending her postcards and fielding calls in her final hours. We find those connections. We find the motive." Ramirez nodded, already on her phone. Miles exhaled and closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the decadent stench of Miami nightlife. A city of sunlit facades and dark undercurrents. And tonight, that current ran lethal. He walked back to the bar, eyes narrowing on the mirrored walls. Somewhere in this glittering den of sin, a killer waited to strike again. and Miles Harrington would be there, tracking, questioning, and unraveling every secret, until the neon lights dimmed on Biscayne's darkest hour. Chapter 3. Catwalk of Lies. The private showcase at the Versailles Hotel was a study in high-gloss opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripped from gilded ceilings, and the polished marble floors reflected the twin beams of camera flashes and recessed spotlighting. A hush fell over the seated VIPs, fashion editors, socialites, and paparazzi as the first model emerged. Miles Harrington stood against the back wall of the makeshift runway room, his eyes scanning every contour of the presentation for anything that might tie back to Alejandra Cruz's final hours. He'd learned that Alex had been booked for a one-off cameo, a midnight unveiling of designer Luca Ross's new collection, Mirrored Souls. Rumor held that Ross was desperate to reclaim his former glory after a string of commercial flops, and Alex Cruz's status as Miami's next big thing was supposed to help him do it. Miles shifted his jacket collar, feeling suddenly out of place among the glittering silks and scandalously cut bodysuits. But he had a job to do. The lights dimmed further, and models progressed in perfect sequence, their limbs carving geometric shapes under the catwalk glare. But Miles's attention snapped to one figure who faltered midway, Kristen Santoro. Once Alex's close friend and fellow model, Kristen now stalked the stage with a brittle smile. Her right arm bore a dark bruise, faded at the edges but still prominent beneath the sheer sleeve of her evening gown. She paused beneath the spotlight, her expression tight, then continued toward the exit with the others. When the show concluded, Miles approached the backstage entrance, flashing his badge to a harried publicist. "Detective Harrington, private event," he said. "I need a word with Kristen Santoro." The publicist glanced at a roster, then waved him through. "Room D down the hall, but she's upset, took a hard fall just minutes ago, might not talk." Room D smelled of hairspray, cologne, and anxiety. Rolling racks of couture hung along one wall, and makeup stations cluttered with palettes and brushes lined another. Kristen sat on a low leather ottoman, shoulders hunched, head bowed. A slender assistant dabbed concealer under her eye, where the bruise threatened to bloom into a shiner. Miles stepped into the soft glow of a vanity bulb. "Ms. Santoro," he began, voice low but firm. "Detective Harrington, may I sit?" She didn't look up. He took a seat across from her. Only then did he study her face, pale, bloodless lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand you and Alex Cruz were close." Kristen's eyes flashed blue-gray like a stormy sea. She pushed a strand of bleached blonde hair behind her ear. "Were," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But they." She got what she deserved. A tremor in her tone made Miles lean in. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the bruise. "That fall? I slipped on a wet spot backstage. You should see the swelling on my hip." She shifted to reveal faint discoloration at her waistline. "Everything happens for a reason, Detective. Alex climbed too high, stepped on too many toes." Miles reached into his coat pocket, extracted the 2 postcards. "Then perhaps you can explain why these turned up in her condo. Find me where the tide washes secrets ashore, and don't let the tide claim my voice." He placed the envelopes on a nearby table. Messages she never sent. Kristen's gaze darted to the postcards, then back to Miles. Her lower lip quivered. I don't know anything about those." She shook her head quickly, as if expelling an unwanted thought. "Those are—" She cut herself off, noticing the assistant hovering in the doorway. With a curt nod, Kristen excused Miles. "Not now, Detective." But as Miles rose, he caught sight of something taped beneath the vanity mirror. A Polaroid of Alex and Kristen, smiling arm in arm against a pastel sunset. On the glass, scrawled in red marker, was a single word: rival. He pocketed the photo. "Detective?" Kristen's voice stopped him. "Be careful, everyone here has something to hide." Her eyes pleaded just for a moment. "Even me." Back in the hallway, Miles reviewed his notes. The bruise on Kristen's arm she claimed a backstage spill, but the angle of the swelling suggested a grip clamp, not a fall. The postcards, 2 cryptic invitations pointing to secrets buried along the shoreline. And now this Polaroid, the word rival indicting not only a competition for fame, but the possibility of deeper, more personal animus. He followed the publicist's directions to the green room, where stylists and photographers congregated. There, amidst half-open garment bags and discarded champagne flutes, he found Ross's personal photographer, Marina Silva, known for her unflinching portraits. She clutched a Promax camera, her knuckles white. "Detective," she murmured when Miles introduced himself, "you're looking for footage from tonight?" He nodded. "I shot some behind-the-scenes clips. Thought Luca might use them for marketing." She gestured to her camera M lens cap. It matched the one found at the condo. Miles's pulse quickened. "Mind if I take a look at those clips?" he asked. Her lip twisted. "I stored them on a digital cassette in my car. I can get them for you, but you should know Alex and Kristen had a blow-up before the show." She took a breath. Words were exchanged. Something about betrayal. "Betrayal how?" Miles leaned forward. Marina looked away, then back at him, eyes haunted. Alex accused Kristen of leaking their positions to a certain agent, one who blackmailed models with incriminating photos unless they let him represent them. Alex found out she refused to work with him, and Kristen. She didn't come to her defense. Miles filed that in his mind. Blackmail photos. A hint that someone was using secrets as currency. He closed his notebook. "Get those clips and any shot lists. I want to see who stuck close to Alex, who avoided her, and who showed up with Kristen after." As Marina scurried out, Miles retreated into the corridor, pressing his back to the wall. Every player in this drama, designer, model, photographer, agent, wore motivations like couture, tailored, expensive, and concealing more than they revealed. He exhaled, steeling himself. Beneath the runway's bright glare lay a tangle of rivalries, half-spoken threats and bruised alliances, and in the alleys beyond the neon lights, secrets waited to be dredged up, secrets that might have drowned Alex Cruz. Miles Harrington straightened his jacket and walked on, determined to follow the trail. Because when catwalk perfection collides with raw ambition, deception is always the final act. Chapter 4. Postcard to Nowhere. The first light of dawn painted Biscayne Bay in pale gold as Detective Miles Harrington climbed out of his rental car onto the sand just north of Matheson Hammock Park. He held the pastel Palm Beach postcard in his hand, the one marked, "Find me where the tide washes secrets ashore." The shoreline here was strewn with broken shells and driftwood bleached by sun and salt, but amid the detritus stood a solitary structure, an abandoned beach house half buried in dunes, its wood once white now weathered to ash-grey. A century-old relic, the house was shuttered, its windows boarded with planks scrawled by bored graffiti artists. "Freedom" in curling letters. "Go away," half obscured by a pair of faded dolphin stencils. Miles lifted the edge of one board and peered inside. Darkness yawned, punctuated only by stray beams of morning sun slicing through cracks. He wore gloves and holstered his gun under his jacket just in case. He crossed the threshold. The air smelled of mildew, rotten seaweed, and something coppery. His flashlight beam danced over peeling wallpaper, patterned with pink hibiscus flowers, a macabre reminder of Miami's sun-soaked façade. On the floor, footprints in fine sand led past a toppled rocking chair to a smashed window at the rear. Miles swept the beam upward. Taped above the broken pane was another pastel postcard, held in place by a single seashell, identical to the one he'd bagged at the condo. He switched it on, revealing in faint blue ink, "I heard the tide sing my name." He snapped photos, then pocketed the card and shell. Beneath the window, half hidden under a layer of sand, lay the chaise longue, luxury furnishings displaced like a surreal beach installation. Dark stains mottled its once ivory upholstery. Miles crouched, examining the blood flecks that speckled the wood frame. He dusted a corner with powder. Darker crimson smudged his gloved fingertip. Fresh, no more than 24 hours old. Footsteps on weathered floorboards made him whirl. A figure emerged from an adjoining room. A young woman in a faded floral sundress, her hair tangled, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She held her arms defensively, clutching a beach bag. "Who are you?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Mia Reyes, right?" Miles said, tone gentle. "I'm Detective Harrington, Miami PD. You called in tips about Miss Cruz, your friend?" She nodded, stepping forward into the flashlight's arc. "How did you—" She swallowed, eyes darting to the chaise longue. "Why here?" He showed her the postcard. "This was in her condo. I traced it here. Can you tell me anything about this place?" Mia bit her lip. "My family owned it. My grandmother's summer cottage. But we abandoned it years ago. I come here sometimes to think." She gestured toward the chaise. "I brought the chaise up from the dunes yesterday. It washed in after that storm. I thought it was art. I painted on it once for an installation." She swallowed hard. "I didn't touch the upholstery." Her gaze flicked to the dark stains. "Did you see anyone else?" Miles asked. "Anyone come here after you left?" She shook her head, trembling. "I came at low tide, around midnight. The moon was bright. I sat on that chaise and I heard someone whisper. I thought it was the wind. Then I found a cassette tape in my bag, Alex's voice. I swear." He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. "Where's the tape now?" "In my bag," she said, rummaging through a sagging canvas tote. She withdrew a small Walkman and a clear plastic cassette marked A. Cruz, 4497. Miles slid it into an evidence bag, careful not to disturb any fingerprints. Mia stared at him. "I didn't touch anything else. I was going to bring that tape to you. Then I saw the chaise and I panicked." She clutched her bag strap. "I didn't want to be next." He nodded. "You did the right thing by staying away until now. I'm going to need your statement, but first I need to know what's on that tape." Her fingers shook as she handed him the Walkman. Miles pressed play. Static hissed. Then Alex's voice came through, faint but unmistakable. "You promised to take me away from all this. You said at the yacht party you'd protect me, your words, but now you're gone. I'm afraid. If anyone finds this, listen to my warning. Trust no one on this water." Miles paused the player. "This is crucial evidence. Any idea who you is?" Mia closed her eyes. She was talking to someone, her boyfriend maybe, but she never named him. She opened her eyes, resolve appearing. "I know who has a motive to silence her. It's the senator's aide, Luis Calderon. He uses properties like this to hide meetings. He was obsessed with Alex." Miles's brow furrowed. "Obsession how?" "He introduced her at a fundraiser last month. She was flattered at first, but then he started calling her late nights, begging her to see him here." She pointed to a small office room off the main hall. "He locked the door once when I came by. When she left, she was pale. Said she'd end it, but I think he threatened her." Miles walked toward the office door. The lock looked undisturbed. He turned back. "I'll have officers check his phone records. In the meantime, I need you to come with me to file the formal complaint." He checked his watch. Morning traffic would slow by 10, but every minute counted. "And we'll process the chaise and postcards for prints." Mia swallowed. "Thank you, Detective." He offered a reassuring nod, then stepped outside to survey the beach. The tide was creeping in, white foam licking the dune's edge. Any minute now the water would reclaim the sands, and perhaps the secrets Alex Cruz had left behind. Miles snapped photos of the encroaching tide line. A pattern emerged, footprints leading toward a cluster of rocks half hidden offshore. He squatted and traced the prints. Male heavy boots, size 11. He rose, turning to the house where Mia waited on the porch steps. "Ramirez," he said into his radio, "send a unit to pick up our witness at this location. Also, cordon off the area. Do not let this tide wash away our evidence." He paused, looking back at the pastel-painted cottage. Once a family's refuge, now a stage for murder's silent clues. And out there, beyond the shoreline's curve, someone watched, knowing the tide would soon bury what Alex Cruz had to say. Miles slipped the Walkman to his belt, sealed the postcard envelopes, and steeled himself for what lay ahead. Because when secrets surface at low tide, they're often drowned by the first wave. And this killer had only just begun to rewrite the city's narrative in Alex's blood. Chapter 5 Echoes in Wynwood. Miles Harrington stepped from the rental car onto Northwest 2nd Avenue, the humid Miami air already thick with the promise of midday heat. Around him, Wynwood's famed graffiti murals, an ever-shifting kaleidoscope of color and form stretched block after block, each painting screaming its own message. Here art pulsed through the cracked pavement and rotting warehouse doors, and secrets lurked behind every sprayed-on image. He consulted his notebook. Alex Cruz had volunteered anonymously at a local youth center, supporting at-risk teens through art therapy. An unsigned thank-you letter from the center's director had been found among her belongings, but the name of the street-taught muralist who led those sessions was nowhere on file. Now Miles walked these alleys searching for that missing link. At the corner of Northwest 2nd and Miami Court, he passed a towering mural, an electric blue octopus whose tentacles wove through neon-pink roses. A small plaque at its base bore the signature Echo. He crouched to examine the wall, brushing his fingertips over the letters. Echo. Could that be the artist? He sketched a quick rubbing on a scrap of paper, then glanced up to see a slender man, jeans splattered with paint, a pencil tucked behind his ear, emerging from a side door. "Detective Harrington?" the man asked, eyes narrowed with curiosity. Miles stood and extended his hand. "Miles Harrington, Miami PD, your Echo?" The man hesitated, then nodded. "Name's Rafael Ortiz, but most folks call me Echo. You looking for who tagged those youth center trucks with art heels?" "That's right," Miles said. "Tell me about Alex Cruz's involvement." Rafael's jaw tightened. "She showed up one morning unannounced, worried-looking like she'd seen a ghost. But when she grabbed a paintbrush, the place lit up. Those kids worshipped her." He ran a hand through his dark curls. "She gave up modeling for a day to spray paint with a kid who'd just lost his sister. Taught him to let pain out through color." Miles nodded. "She kept it secret from her handlers?" "Yeah, her agent tried to yank her away half-carried, half-begging, but she looked at him like lightning and said, 'Not today.' Then she stayed all morning." Raphael's eyes darkened. "Kids called her Angel of Wynwood. Nobody knows why she did it. Never asked for photos, never name-dropped, she just helped." "What changed?" Miles pressed. Raphael's gaze flicked to the mural behind him. "Word got out. Someone in the center leaked it to a tabloid. Model moonlights as street artist." The next week, Alex was back in the condo, nervous, looking over her shoulder. He hesitated, then glanced down at his paint-splattered hands. "She showed me something, though. A sketch she made of herself drowning in pastel waves with words scribbled above, 'Save me before I sink.'" He ducked inside the warehouse, returning with a weathered sketchbook. He flipped to a page where a roughly rendered self-portrait in watercolor stared out, mouth open as if screaming beneath the waves. Miles studied the jagged script. "Save me before I sink." "Same handwriting style as the postcards," Miles said softly, tracing the letters. "She was leaving clues all along." Raphael nodded, face grim. "She was scared of somebody, someone who thought Wynwood's shadows could hide anything, but I never imagined." He closed the book and tucked it under his arm. "You need to see the youth center. Meet the director. She'll fill in the blanks." They drove 5 minutes to a nondescript storefront at the edge of the arts district. Inside, sunlight poured through barred windows onto workbenches crowded with paint cans, sculpting clay, and half-finished canvases. Teenagers moved between stations, sketching and laughing, art healing their pain just as Alex had intended. At a desk stacked with donation envelopes sat the director, Marisol Vega, mid-40s, sharp-eyed and poised. She rose to greet Miles. "Detective, thank you for coming," she said, offering a firm handshake. "Alex was a gift to these kids." Miles explained Raphael's account and showed her the sketch and postcards. Marisol's expression darkened as she read. She was trying to tell us something. "What?" Miles asked. Marisol exhaled slowly. The center was infiltrated by someone laundering money through our art auctions. I fired him when I found out. His name was Carlos Mendoza. He threatened to ruin us unless I reinstated him. Then Alex arrived, making things messy. "Did she confront Mendoza?" Miles asked. Marisol nodded. "One evening after hours, I found them arguing near the gallery hallway. Alex accused him of exploiting the kids. He laughed it off, said she was naive. She shoved him. He pulled her back. That night, I saw him leave. Alex stayed behind to sort canvases." "Did she mention anyone else?" Miles turned for Raphael, who was examining a mural of a phoenix rising from ashes. Raphael spoke without turning. "She said someone else was watching. Don't trust anyone in a suit." Miles exchanged a look with Marisol. "Mendoza wears suits." Marisol's lips tightened. "He's the senator's financial backer. The same Calderon aide you asked about. Mendoza's in deep with him." Say a weight settled in Miles's gut. The conspiracy spanned from high-rise condos to kids' art classes. Powerful men using Miami's young for money laundering, blackmail, and control. Alex's compassion had thrust her into the crosshairs. He closed his notebook. "I'm going to need your surveillance photos from the canvases, any footage of Mendoza in the center. And Raphael, I need the full list of murals you painted with Alex, every location where she left her mark." As they gathered materials, Miles stepped into the main room. The teens worked in silence, eyes focused on their creations. One boy sketched the octopus mural, another painted waves in pastel shades, reminiscent of Alex's sketchbook. Their art carried her story forward. He looked at the phoenix mural behind him, a symbol of rebirth rising from tragedy, and imagined Alex's voice echoing here. "Find me where the tide washes secrets ashore." She had whispered her truth through paint, in fellowship with these kids. Miles pocketed the sketch and postcards. "We'll bring Mendoza down," he said, more to himself than to his allies, "and whoever ordered Alex killed." Outside, sunlight glinted off Winwood's murals, illuminating every stroke and spray. These echoes of Alex's compassion, her secret charity work, would become his guideposts in the hunt for her killer. Her voice had not been claimed by the tide, and neither would her justice. Chapter 6. High Stakes, Higher Walls. The invitation arrived in an unmarked black envelope, no insignia, no return address, just a single embossed C on the flap. Inside, a cream-colored card bore the name Miles Harrington in elegant script. Along with the time and location, the Coral Gables Yacht Club, 6 o'clock sharp. It was signed simply C, leaving Miles to infer the host, Luis Calderon, the senator's aide whose shadowy dealings had trailed Alex Cruz in her final days. At 5:45 p.m., Miles drove his rental sedan through the coral-arched entrance of the club. Towering palms rustled above manicured hedges, and a line of gleaming sport yachts bobbed gently along the polished docks. Beyond them stretched Biscayne Bay, its water the color of molten sapphire under the fading sun. A pair of uniformed guards, navy blazers, groomed crew cuts, gold-embossed brass buttons, stepped forward as he rolled down the window. "Detective Harrington," one guard said after scanning the card. "Welcome, enjoy the evening." He handed the card back and gestured toward a red-carpeted gangway. Miles stepped onto the main deck of the flagship yacht, Mar Azul, where soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers. Dozens of guests circulated, dressed in summer white linen and pastel cocktail dresses, delicate flutes of champagne in hand. The upper deck, set with glass-top tables and a succulent bar, looked out across the water's edge of Miami's skyline, an ocean of mirrored towers glowing in dusk. He spotted Calderon near the stern, silhouetted against the bay. The aide was flanked by a pair of impeccably tailored men, their earpieces discreetly concealed. Calderon raised his glass in greeting, his smile too smooth to be genuine. "Miles Harrington," he said, voice warm but measured. "Thank you for coming. I trust you found the invitation acceptable." "So your hospitality is unmatched," Miles replied, surveying the crowd. "I understand this is a private gathering." "Indeed." Calderon motioned to a nearby table laid with hors d'oeuvres, seared scallops on edible flowers, avocado mousse in porcelain spoons. "Help yourself. Tonight we celebrate a new venture in Miami's cultural renaissance," he said, voice dipping low. "An art foundation in honor of Ms. Cruz." He paused, letting the words hang. "A fitting tribute to her legacy." Miles nodded, picking at a scallop. His senses were on high alert. He'd come for two things: to unearth hard evidence linking Calderon and Carlos Mendoza to the black market money laundering that had ensnared Alex, and to discover who else in the city's elite had a hand in her death. Calderon's eyes glinted under the deck lights. "If I can be candid," he said quietly, "your investigation has ruffled more feathers than I anticipated. Rumors are dangerous, Detective." He sipped his champagne, then turned to a passing guest. "Ah, Senator Ramirez, do say hello to Detective Harrington." A tall, silver-haired man approached, smiling broadly. "Miles," he said, extending a hand, "your reputation precedes you. Luis here tells me you're the man to solve this tragic case." Miles studied the senator's face, genuine curiosity beneath practiced geniality. He decided to press. "Senator, I'm eager to see how your foundation plans to honor Ms. Cruz's work. Could I see any documentation or accounts related to its funding?" The senator exchanged a glance with Calderon, whose expression flickered. "The Foundation's books are in transition," Ramsey said. "We're consolidating accounts offshore for ease of international grants. I'm sure Mr. Calderon can provide more details." That was all the opening Miles needed. "I'd appreciate access to the financial records," he said, keeping his tone respectful. "You'll have to speak with the board," Calderon interjected smoothly. "They're upstairs in the lounge, a small gathering, confidential. After all, it's a sensitive matter." Miles nodded, scanning the yacht's interior. A narrow staircase near the galley led up to a private salon on the flybridge. He thanked the senator and Calderon, then slipped through a curtained doorway and ascended. At the top, a vaulted room spread before him. Dark mahogany floors, cream-colored walls adorned with minimalist paintings. A circle of high-backed chairs faced a glass table, atop which lay a leather portfolio embossed with the same C. Calderon and two sober-faced men were already seated. The others included a fashion magnate, a real estate tycoon, and a banker known for discreet foreign transfers. Calderon stood as Miles entered. "Detective, welcome," he said, his smile now judicial. "I trust you'll keep this discussion between us. This is not a public meeting." Miles closed the door behind him. "Understood." He nodded to the banker. "Ms. Lawson, Mr. Harrington requests the ledger sheets and specified offshore account details tied to the Cruz Foundation." Lawson, a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a bun, hesitated. "Detective, these accounts are under strict privacy regulations, but perhaps we can share a summary." Miles held up his badge. "I have a warrant for financial documents related to the Foundation's funds during the relevant period, from March to April 1997. Any attempt to conceal or destroy records will be noted in my report." Silence fell. Calderon's jaw clenched. "We didn't expect a warrant in hand," he said, voice cool. "Very well." At that moment, the yacht lurched slightly as it shifted its moorings. Outside the windows, the marina's floodlights flickered, casting long shadows across the partygoers below. It was the distraction Miles needed. He moved swiftly. "Ms. Lawson, please hand over the documents now." As she reached into the portfolio, Miles edged behind her. With a practiced flick, he drew a small LED flashlight from his pocket and shone it on the table's edge, revealing a hidden drawer. Before Lawson could react, Miles slid across and snapped open the latch. Inside lay a thick stack of passports, bank statements, and carbon-copied ledgers, all bearing the Cruise Foundation watermark, and annotated in Calderon's handwriting, account numbers, shell company names, transaction dates, and amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars wired to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Zurich, and Panama. He simply lifted the papers. "Thank you," he said, as footsteps echoed behind him. The banker gasped, Calderon's face drained of color. Miles tucked the documents under his arm. "Ramirez," he whispered into his lapel mic. "We're good. Send a squad to the docks, block the exits. I need every guest ID checked." Calderon rose, eyes blazing. "You stole those records." Miles pivoted, holding the papers like a shield. "I secured evidence," he said evenly. "Now step aside." Calderon lunged, but a sudden crash of glass erupted below as backup units arrived, ramming through the main salon's arched windows, forcing stunned board members to duck for cover. Sirens wailed. Guests scattered. On deck, uniformed officers sealed off the gangway. Miles strode downstairs, the seized ledgers in hand. Calderon trailed behind, placating shaken tycoons. The senator appeared at the entrance, voice hoarse. "Detective, once you review those documents, you'll see this foundation was only a front." Miles fixed him with a steady gaze. "Every account, every wire transfer will be logged. Your aide and these benefactors will answer for their part in Alex Cruz's murder and their money laundering scheme." As the night air pulsed with radio chatter and flashing lights, Miles Harrington stepped onto the coral-paved pier, ledger in hand, resolute in his next move. The walls of wealth and privilege had cracked, and now the foundations beneath them would crumble. Chapter 7, Broken Promises. Detective Miles Harrington stood beneath the staccato glow of a neon sign reading Club Sonido, the bass thumping through the humid Miami night. Inside these soundproof walls, a burgeoning Cuban rap artist named Javi Morales held court, a figure at the intersection of Miami's underground music scene and the city's growing Latin diaspora. Javi had once been Alejandra Cruz's closest confidant, their friendship forged in art therapy sessions and late-night jam sessions. Now he was her ex-lover, and Miles hoped he still held the key to unraveling the final hours of Alex's life. He ducked past the bouncer and pushed through a curtain into a cavernous back room, its walls plastered with posters of Javi's face and spray-painted slogans, Voz del Barrio and Rap sobre Ruinas. A half-dozen crew members lounged on battered couches, but all eyes snapped to Miles's badge. "I'm Detective Harrington," Miles said, voice steady over the low rumble of conversation. "I need to speak with Javier Morales." One of the crew, a slender man with dreadlocks, pointed toward a door marked Studio A. "You're about 5 minutes too late." He took off in his car, left with a tape in his hand. He smirked, then shrugged and walked away. Miles nodded at another roadie, a stout woman with a gold chain and wary eyes. "Where does he live?" The woman glanced at the closed studio door, then back at Miles. "He's got a spot down by Little Havana, 1 bedroom above an old cigar lounge, but he's on tour in Orlando until tomorrow morning." Miles's jaw tightened. "That tape, what was it?" The roadie hesitated. "He called it Our Last Radio. Said it was something Alex gave him, didn't want to play it in public. Quieter than his tracks, he said. A quieter track. A final message." Miles's pulse quickened. He thanked her and slipped out into the humid night, already dialing Ramirez. "Ramirez, get a warrant for Javier Morales' apartment, seize any tapes or recording equipment, and track his flight to Orlando. He's our next stop." 2 hours later, Miles found himself in the pastel stucco courtyard of a low-rise building on Calle Ocho, the scent of roasting coffee beans drifting from a neighbor's cafe. He flashed his warrant to a sleepy superintendent, then climbed the narrow staircase to Unit 3B. The door opened under his knock to reveal sparse furnishings, a battered turntable, stacks of vinyl, and a single mixing console glowing with standby lights. "No, Javier." Ramirez, seizing on a street noise in the background, held up her phone. Detective, look, security cam shows Morales dragging a duffel bag down the alley toward the lounge. He left the window open. Miles slipped inside and crossed to the open window overlooking a dimly lit courtyard. Below, a dark green Plymouth sat idling by the curb. He raised his voice. "Ramirez, I'm going after him. Call for a perimeter." He vaulted through the window, dropped into the alley, and sprinted toward the street just as the Plymouth peeled away. Miles dashed after it, zigzagging through parked cars, drawing his Glock. The engine roared as the car turned onto the main road. Despite Miami's narrow lanes, Miles kept pace, adrenaline fueling each stride. He radioed for an intercept unit, then stayed focused on the taillights until they vanished around a corner. Panting, he slowed and reoriented himself. According to his map, Javi's route would lead north on Flagler Street. He hailed a passing taxi and gave the driver instructions. "Hurry, please, West Flagler, then a right on 20th. The driver floored the accelerator. Miles opened the duffel bag he'd retrieved from the apartment. Inside lay clothes, a pair of headphones, and one small item wrapped in cloth. The cassette. He unwrapped it. A plain TDK shell labeled in Alex's handwriting, "Javi, don't forget me." He palmed the tape and pressed it gently against his chest. This was the hidden cassette, bound to change everything. At the reunion of West Flagler and 20th, Miles spotted the taxi's headlights parked crooked, but no sign of the Plymouth. He hopped out, gun drawn, and circled the block on foot. Through a gap between buildings, he caught Javi's silhouette darting into a fenced lot behind an old bakery. The fence was chain-link. Miles climbed up and dropped inside. In the lot center stood a rusting shipping container. Miles approached, voice raised. "Javi Morales, put it down and come out with your hands up." The container door rocked, then slid open. Javi emerged, breathing hard, eyes wild with fatigue and fear. In one hand he held the cassette, in the other a small handheld recorder. "Detective," he rasped. "You don't understand. She made me promise." "Promise what?" Miles stepped forward, holstering his gun but keeping a hand near the trigger. "What did Alex tell you?" Javi's shoulders sagged. He held out the recorder. "She recorded it, my ex-producer Mendoza. His voice. He admits he paid for those postcards the beach house set up, everything to scare her into silence. But she turned it around, recording him without his knowledge. She gave me the tape in case she vanished." His eyes filled. "I was supposed to hide it, keep it safe. She said, when they come for me, Javi, you play this and they'll pay." Then she was gone. Miles snapped on gloves and took the recorder, then the cassette. "You did the right thing. Stay here with Ramirez. She's close. I'm taking this to forensics." Javi nodded, wiping his eyes. "She always kept her word, Detective. I'm sorry I doubted her." Miles turned, slipping into the shadows before unlocking his phone. "Ramirez, he's in custody. Get him and process his statement. I want that recorder and cassette analyzed immediately. If what he says is true, we've got Mendoza on tape, admitting to orchestrating Alex's terror, and implicating Calderon's foundation in silencing her." As he climbed back over the fence, Miles felt the weight of the tape in his pocket. Alex's voice preserved, ready to expose the corrupt, and perhaps the killer who'd taken her life. In the hush of the lot, beneath the hum of distant traffic, he whispered, "I won't let your promise break, Alex. I'll find who murdered you." Chapter 8. Discordant Harmony. The vaulted ceilings of the Miami Civic Center concert hall reverberated with static as Miles Harrington ducked beneath the velvet ropes. Tonight, a clandestine grunge-inspired reunion show had been organized by an upstart promoter looking to cash in on nostalgia, and Alex's last known playlist was said to be the set list. Miles suspected the killer would surface here, hoping to collect remaining evidence or silence any lingering witnesses. On stage, a quartet of silver-haired musicians tuned battered guitars beneath a single spotlight. In the crowd, a muted frenzy of vintage flannel and leather stirred around them. Miles slipped past clusters of fans, eyes on the backstage corridor to his left. He clutched the cassette recorder, Harvey's tape still fresh with Mendoza's voice, and a dossier of Calderon's financial forgeries, evidence enough to tear open their entire network. He rounded the corner to the green room entrance just as the house lights dimmed. 2 burly security guards blocked the door, arms crossed. Miles showed his badge. "Miami PD. I need immediate access. This is evidence." One guard hesitated, then nodded. "Right this way, detective." Inside, the green room was awash in muted gold. Empty bottles of tequila and craft beer littered a low table, and a circle of mismatched chairs faced a cracked mirror. On the table lay the evening's original set list, handwritten on yellowed notebook paper. First chord, Rain City Rhapsody, Under the Covers, Broken Strings, Echoes in the Underground, Seattle Skyline, Chord Progression, Discordant Harmony, Final Verse, Fade to Black. Miles recognized Alex's meticulous script. Someone here had planted it deliberately. He snapped photos, then rifled through the bottles until he found a half-empty flask stamped with the logo of Calderon's yacht, Mar Azul. He pocketed it as evidence. A sudden creak behind him made him whirl. The door stood ajar. He slipped through into a narrow backstage hallway where cables snaked across the floor like metallic vipers. At the hall's end, a cluster of crates bore stenciled letters, Fragile, Biotech Development. Miles frowned. What were biotech crates doing at a music venue? His radio crackled. "Detective," Ramirez's voice whispered. "I've got something camera footage from the clubhouse docks. A white van pulled up 10 minutes before the show. 2 men unloaded a crate matching that stenciling, then left with a duffel bag. One had Mendoza's tattoo." Miles swallowed. "On my way." He pocketed the flask and stepped over cables, heading toward the loading dock. Outside, the air was cool from Miami, and the smell of ivy-wreathed walls mixed with diesel exhaust. A pair of officers stood beside a rolling door that had been left open. Miles ducked inside. The cavernous dock was lined with crates and pallets. On a pallet, Jack sat the same biotech crate from backstage. Its side panel had been pried open, revealing stainless steel cylinders engraved with biohazard symbols. "What is this?" Miles asked. An officer handed him a clipboard. "Shipping manifest lists specialized cooling units, destined for a local research lab, Juno Biotech, but the crate's label says A. Cruz Foundation." Miles knelt beside the cylinders, noting a fine residue on the lids. White powder he recognized from toxicology reports. A synthetic, paralytic agent potent enough to kill within minutes if inhaled. He sealed a sample in a vial. The implications were chilling. The killer had weaponized biotech to eliminate Alex and stage her death as an accident. He rose as footsteps echoed behind him. Ramirez appeared, phone in hand. "I traced the van's plate. It's rented by a shell company tied to Calderon's foundation. And the CCTV from the loading dock shows a man in a suit scanning his badge to gain access." "So Calderon's reach extends even here," Miles said. "They tried to kill her with poison delivered to the Civic Center under the guise of art equipment." He glanced at the green room door. "They meant to kill again, maybe during the show when security was distracted." Ramirez shivered. "But why the crate? Why not do it at the condo?" Miles tucked the sample vial into his coat pocket. "Because they wanted plausible deniability. An accidental leak or a freak exposure during loading, nobody questions a medical shipment. And if bodies pile up, they can claim an industrial accident." He rubbed his forehead. "This goes deeper than postcards and beach houses. They have the means to manufacture death." At that moment, the dock's door banged open as a suited figure stormed in Calderon. He saw Miles examining the cylinders and froze. "Detective," he said, voice cool but eyes wild. "This is unfortunate, but you have no jurisdiction here." Miles didn't look up. "I have jurisdiction over murder, Mr. Calderon, and attempted murder with a banned agent. Your foundation fundings, those ledgers, they all tie back to you." He stood, facing the aide. "I'm placing you under arrest." Calderon's lips parted in a snarl. You'll regret this." He turned, bolted toward the exit. Miles lunged, drawing his Glock. Ramirez tackled Calderon's arm. The bottle flask fell and shattered at Calderon's feet. "Stay down," Miles ordered as backup sirens wailed outside. Handcuffs clicked shut around the aide's wrists. Calderon spat blood. "You think it ends here?" "It ends when justice is served," Miles replied, cuffing him to a nearby rail. He radioed for hazmat and forensics. "We've got a biohazard incident. Secure the area." As officers moved crates into containment, Miles stared at the shattered flask and cylinders. Alex's death had been orchestrated with clinical precision, a fusion of artifice and science. And yet, she had left behind postcards and tape, urging him onward. He stepped outside, the humid air resettling around him. Fluorescent dock lights piercing the darkness. Justice would be served, not in a staged suicide, but in a courtroom. And as the first suspect in Alex's murder now sat in custody, Miles Harrington realized the killer's final symphony had been silenced, and the silence that followed would echo far louder than any discordant harmony. Chapter 9. The Designer's Secret. The pastel façade of Villa Solange sat like a sugar-coated relic on Coral Gables' leafy El Prado Boulevard, a low stucco mansion painted in washed-out salmon and mint, trimmed with white lattice. Miles Harrington maneuvered his unmarked sedan through the wrought-iron gates, just as twilight settled into Miami's humid embrace. Above him, Spanish tile roofs glowed soft orange under the streetlights. Inside, he knew, waited Luca Ross, the fashion savant whose glittering façade masked a rusting core of desperation. Miles ascended the flagstone path, flashing his badge to the uniformed butler who answered the door. "Detective Harrington," the butler intoned, bowing. "Right this way." He led Miles through a foyer hung with Ross's framed sketches, elegant gowns, sinewy silhouettes, and in the corner of one image, a tiny corner of Alex Cruz's name, penciled in the margin. The butler ushered him into a library, warmed by amber sconces and lined with books on couture and art. There Luca Ross reclined in an overstuffed armchair, splayed limbs draped in a crumpled designer robe. His face, once angular and poised, was drawn and weary. "Miles Harrington," Ross greeted, voice smooth but brittle. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Mr. Ross," Miles said, taking a seat across from him, "I'm here to discuss Ms. Cruz's final movements and your role in them." He placed a thin stack of evidence on the coffee table, Javi's recorder, the poisoned flask shards, and the ledger pages annotated with Ross's signature. Ross's eyelids fluttered. I swear, Detective, I had nothing to do with her death." Miles opened the recorder. "Let's start with your relationship. You employed Alex for your private showcase on March 28th. You knew she was scared. She recorded Mendoza's threats and entrusted the tape to Javi." He pressed play. Mendoza's arrogant voice echoed faintly, admitting to orchestrating postcards and beach house scares. Ross flinched. "She was a muse," he said. "A beautiful soul. I wanted to help her career." "Yet she found your signature in those ledgers," Miles said, pointing to the annotated pages. "Payments to your studio, hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted from the fake foundation. You were laundering cartel cash through fashion lines, and Alex discovered it." Ross's face went pale. He rose, pacing, hands clasped behind his back. "Yes, I took the money. The foundation's offshore accounts funded my comeback. I was bankrupt, nearly ruined. When Alex confronted me, she threatened to expose everything." "So you lured her here tonight?" Miles asked, voice low. Ross stopped near a bay window, gazing out at his manicured lagoon. "I invited her under the guise of a private fitting, told her I had a new collection to premiere. She came willingly. I planned to negotiate, pay her off, keep her silent." He ran a hand through his hair. "But when I confessed, she refused. Called me a hypocrite. She said she wouldn't let this continue." "And then?" Miles prompted. "I didn't kill her," Ross said quickly. "I barely raised a hand." His shoulders trembled. "But she recorded our argument on her phone. She had proof. I panicked. I called Mendoza, begging him to intervene. I thought, maybe scare her, make her withdraw the tape. He bowed his head. I'm ashamed. Miles leaned forward. Mendoza arrived with the biotech crate paralytic agent. He poisoned her at the condo, staged the fall. Your butler told us you gave him free access. You provided the access codes. Ross's breathing quickened. I thought they'd only threaten her. I never wanted her dead. The evidence suggests otherwise, Miles said, tossing the ledger sheets onto a side table. Your signature is on the manifests. Your robes were found in Mendoza's delivery van, and your fingerprints are on the postcards, handwritten by Alex in her last hours. Ross closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. She wrote those cards to lead someone to the beach house. She knew I'd come looking for her. I begged her to drop the confrontation. But she loved this city, its hidden beauty. She thought I could be redeemed. Miles stood. Ms. Cruz's belief in you became her undoing. You and Calderon used her compassion to entangle her in your schemes. Ross slumped into a chair, tears glimmering. What have I done? You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering and accessory after the fact, Miles said, producing handcuffs. Your confession and these documents will seal your fate. Ross pressed his hands together as the cuffs clicked. I'm sorry, Alex, I'm so sorry. Miles escorted him toward the front door. The mansion's pastel walls seemed suddenly gaudy, mocking. Outside, patrol cars formed a barrier, their lights painting the scene in harsh reds and blues. As Ross was led away, Miles paused at the bay window overlooking the koi pond. He closed his eyes, remembering Alex's laughter as she painted murals with Winwood's kids, the tremble in her voice on Javi's recorder, the postcards fluttering like desperate messages in the breeze. The designer's secret had unveiled the final link in the chain, but the real architect of Alex's death remained in custody too. Mendoza, copper-handed and unrepentant. Yet the web of greed spun beyond these two men, entrenched in a city where art and ambition collided with crime. Miles Harrington watched a koi dart beneath lily pads, then turned away. Tomorrow he would stand in court with Javi's tape, the ledgers and Ross's confession, ensuring every player answered for their role. Tonight, though, he allowed himself a moment of stillness, because in this city of pastel sunsets and neon nights, justice weighed heavier than any designer's secret. Chapter 10, Fade to Black. The courtroom was hushed, save for the occasional rustle of paper and the distant hum of the air conditioning. Outside, Miami's relentless humidity clung to the courthouse façade, a stark contrast to the crisp air inside. Detective Miles Harrington sat at the prosecution table, dossier neatly arranged. Javi Morales' recorder, the Don't Forget Me cassette, the Cruz Foundation ledgers, and Luca Ross's signed confession. Each piece of evidence glinted under the recessed lights, ready to speak in Alex Cruz's defense. The gallery beyond the bar rail was packed with familiar faces. Marisol Vega, the youth center director, clutching a worn sketchbook. Rafael Ortiz, Echo, perched beside her, eyes vigilant. Officer Ramirez, nodding once in silent encouragement. Even Mia Reyes clutching the plastic evidence bag containing Alex's Walkman. Javi himself sat in the front row, hands folded, the weight of guilt and hope balanced in his expression. At the bench, Judge Callahan surveyed the room. Miles rose when his name was called, slipping from his seat to take the stand. He recounted the investigation's arc, the staged balcony fall, the beach house clues, the Winwood murals, the poisoned biotech crates, the clandestine yacht meeting, the garage pursuit of Javi, the green room ambush, and the final unraveling of Ross's and Mendoza's secrets. He played the key portions of Alejandro Mendoza's admission, orchestrating threats, funding poison, and silencing Alex forever. The courtroom's hush deepened as Alex's recorded voice filled the chamber. Vulnerable, urgent, her last plea to trust no one on this water. When the playback ended, Miles closed his eyes for a brief moment. Then he faced the jury, voice firm. Ms. Cruise's only crime was compassion. Her kindness brought her into the crosshairs of powerful men who weaponized her trust. Today, her voice speaks for her. He stepped down, leaving the echoes of Alex's warning to resonate. The defense tried to challenge Fry's chain of custody for the cassette and argue that Ross's confession was coerced. Ross had, after all, been desperate. But cross-examination shattered those claims. Ross had voluntarily met Miles in his own library, tears in his eyes, reciting every detail. Forensics confirmed the primer on the postcard shells matched beach house sand. The traces of paralytic agent on Alex's upholstery and the biotech cylinder residue left no room for doubt. After 3 days of testimony, closing arguments were delivered. The prosecutor invoked the memory of Alex Cruise, a talented model turned activist, silenced by greed. The defense pleaded for mercy, painting Ross and Mendoza as fallible men who panicked but did not intend murder. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. When they returned, the tension in the room was palpable. Judge Callahan called the court to order. The 4-person stood. We, the jury, find the defendant Alejandro Mendoza guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and distribution of a controlled biological agent. We, the jury, find the defendant Luca Ross guilty of money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact. A collective exhale swept through the gallery. Javi sobbed, and Marisol Vega gripped his shoulder. Officer Ramirez touched Miles's arm, offering a small, proud smile. Outside the courthouse, the Miami sun beat down with renewed intensity. Reporters clustered around, microphones extended, cameras rolling. Miles exited through the veterans' gate, flanked by uniformed officers. In the press fray, he spotted Marisol, Rafael, Mia, and Javi waiting on the steps. Marisol embraced him fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes, "for letting her voice be heard." Rafael pressed a framed photo into Miles's hand, a snapshot of Alex and the youth center kids during a paint session, rainbow splatters on white canvas. "Keep this," Rafael said, "so we never forget why she did it." Mia offered the Walkman. "Her last message," she said simply. Javi stepped forward, voice trembling. "She believed in justice. You made it real." Miles nodded, touched. He pocketed the photo and handed the recorder back to Mia. "Her voice will keep speaking," he said, "in court, on walls, and in every painted mural." They dispersed, each carrying a piece of Alex's legacy. Miles turned toward his car but paused to take in the courthouse courtyard, palm fronds quivering in the breeze, the courthouse steps stained by footsteps of grief and relief, and the distant hum of city life moving on. In the rearview mirror, he noticed a mural on the opposite wall, a massive phoenix rising from waves of cobalt and gold, emblazoned with Alex's final words, "Save me before I sink." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Justice is the tide that will not forget." Miles closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath. The case was closed, the guilty condemned, the innocent vindicated, but the city's currents would keep shifting, revealing new stories, new secrets. He started the engine, aware that another call could come at any moment. As he drove away, the Miami skyline shimmered against a fading pink horizon. He passed neon palm trees and pastel Art Deco lodgings, each storefront and alley bearing the imprint of both beauty and danger. And somewhere amid the bustle, strange postcards might still wash ashore, whispers of secrets yet to be uncovered. Miles Harrington took one last look at the city's silhouette, vowing to return if the tide ever needed to wash up another truth. Then he steered into traffic, Miami's pulse under his wheels, its mysteries awaiting his next step. For in a city so alive, the final chapter was never truly the end. End of chapter and end of story. Please like and subscribe to support our channel, and to listen to more murder mysteries and investigative stories.